My mother-in-law humiliated me at my wedding. I stayed silent, but the next morning, I always knew my mother-in-law didn't like me, but I never thought she would humiliate me in front of 200 guests at my own wedding. Even now, when I think about that moment, I feel a mix of anger, disbelief, and satisfaction. Because while I stayed silent that night, the next morning, I started something that my mother-in-law would never forget. Let me take you back to the beginning. I am 28 years old, and my husband is 30. We have been together for 4 years, and in that time, his mother has made it very clear that she does not approve of me. She never said it directly, but her words were always laced with hidden insults. Every smile she gave me felt forced. Every compliment sounded like a backhanded remark. She believed I was not good enough for her son. Her reasons? I did not come from a wealthy family. I did not graduate from an Ivy League school. Worst of all, I was not his ex-girlfriend, Claire. Yes, Claire. The woman my mother-in-law adored. Claire came from a respected family, had a successful career, and, according to my mother-in-law, was the perfect match for her son. She would find any excuse to bring Claire up in conversation. Claire always knew how to host a proper dinner party. Claire had such a sophisticated sense of fashion. Claire and my son made such a beautiful couple. I tolerated it for years. I thought that once my husband and I got engaged, she would finally accept me. I was wrong. The months leading up to the wedding were exhausting. My mother-in-law tried everything she could to make my life difficult. She attempted to change the venue at the last minute, claiming that ours was too simple. She invited guests we had never met, including some of Claire's family members. She criticized my dress, saying it was not flattering and lacked elegance. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened at the wedding reception. At first, everything seemed fine. The ceremony was beautiful. My husband and I exchanged our vows. For a moment I thought that maybe, just maybe, my mother-in-law had decided to behave. I was wrong. During the reception, after dinner, it was time for the speeches. My maid of honor spoke first, delivering a heartfelt toast that brought tears to my eyes. My father followed with warm words about how proud he was of me. Then, my mother-in-law stood up. She smiled as she took the microphone, but there was something in her expression. Something cold. I just want to say a few words about my son and his lovely new wife. I should have known right then that something was about to go horribly wrong. When my son first introduced me to my name, I was surprised. The room fell silent. My husband tensed beside me. My bridesmaids exchanged uneasy glances. My father's face darkened, but my mother-in-law continued. I always imagined my son with someone different. Someone more ambitious. Someone who shared his values. Someone who came from the same kind of background. I heard guests shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Some exchanged glances, unsure of how to react. But my mother-in-law was not finished. But love is strange, isn't it? Sometimes we end up with people we never expected. A few nervous chuckles rippled through the room. My hands clenched into fists under the table. My stomach twisted into knots. Then she delivered the final blow. All I can do now, she sighed dramatically, is hope he never regrets it. Silence. Complete. Utter silence. I looked at my husband. His jaw was clenched so tightly his knuckles turned white. He looked like he was about to explode. But before he could say anything, my mother-in-law raised her glass and smirked. To the happy couple. A few hesitant voices echoed her toast, but most of the guests remained frozen, unsure of how to react. I should have said something. I should have stood up and called her out. I should have thrown my champagne in her face. But I did not. Instead, I smiled. I raised my glass, took a sip of champagne, and acted like nothing had happened. I saw the smug look on my mother-in-law's face. She thought she had won. She had no idea. Because while I stayed silent that night, the next morning, I started something she would never forget. I woke up the next morning feeling strangely calm. I expected to feel angry, embarrassed, or even heartbroken about what happened at my wedding, but instead, I felt something different. Clarity. Last night, my mother-in-law tried to humiliate me in front of my friends, my family, and my husband. She thought she had the upper hand, that she had won. She had no idea what was coming, because today, I was going to make sure that she would never forget what she did. My husband and I were staying at a luxury hotel for the night, a wedding gift from my parents. As I stretched and turned to my side, I saw my husband sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at his phone. His face was pale. "Babe, my mom sent me, like, 10 messages last night." I sat up and glanced at his screen. My mother-in-law had sent a series of texts, each one more self-centered than the last. "I was just being honest. You'll thank me later." She should be grateful I even made a speech. "Your wife is being dramatic. She needs to toughen up if she wants to be in this family." In this family? I took the phone from his hands and scrolled down. Then I saw something that made my stomach drop. She had posted a public Facebook status about the wedding. "Last night, I had to watch my son make the biggest mistake of his life. It's hard watching someone you love settle for less, but all I can do now is pray he realizes it before it's too late." She even had the audacity to attach a picture of us at the altar, acting like she was the victim in all of this. I turned to my husband, who looked absolutely furious. "That's it," he muttered, grabbing his phone. "She's gone too far this time." I placed a hand on his arm. "No," I said calmly. "Let me handle this." Before doing anything, I took my phone and blocked my mother-in-law on everything. Phone? Blocked. Social media? Blocked. Email? Blocked. I even went through my wedding photos and unfriended every single person who liked or commented on her Facebook post. If they supported her, they were not my people. Then, I took my husband's phone and blocked her there too. He didn't argue. He just nodded and let me do it. "I don't want her in our lives," he said. "Not after this." Good, that was exactly what I needed to hear. Blocking her was not enough. I wanted people to see her for who she really was. Instead of confronting her, I took a different approach. I logged into my own Facebook and made a single post. Grateful for all the love and support we received on our wedding day. It was truly magical, and I couldn't have asked for a better partner. Unfortunately, not everyone was as happy for us as they pretended to be. But that's okay, because when people show you who they really are, believe them. I attached a video from our wedding reception, the exact moment when my mother-in-law said, "All I can do is hope he never regrets it." I didn't tag her. I didn't mention her name, but everyone knew exactly who I was talking about. Within an hour, the post had hundreds of comments. "I can't believe she said that at your wedding. That's disgusting. You handled that so well. I would have lost it. Your mother-in-law just embarrassed herself. You didn't even need to say anything." And the best part? Someone sent the post to her. She tried to comment, but she was already blocked. My mother-in-law had always held a false sense of power over my husband. She manipulated him, guilt-tripped him, and made him feel like he owed her something. Not anymore. That day, we made 3 major decisions. We moved up our honeymoon. Originally, we planned to leave in a month. Instead, we packed our bags and left that afternoon. We turned off our phones and disappeared for 3 weeks. No texts, no drama, no mother-in-law. We set new boundaries. My mother-in-law was not allowed in our home unless she apologized sincerely. She had zero say in our future plans, including when we had kids. She lost all access to our lives unless she changed. We left my mother-in-law to deal with the consequences. Her friends and family started calling her out for what she did. My husband's relatives took our side. People saw through her manipulative Facebook posts and stopped engaging with her drama. And just like that, my mother-in-law realized she had lost control over us. She had humiliated me at my wedding. She thought she had won. But in the end, she only destroyed herself. That night, as my husband and I sat in a beautiful beachfront villa on our honeymoon, he turned to me and smiled. "You handled that perfectly." I smiled back. I didn't need to fight her. I just needed to let her destroy herself. And honestly, that was the most satisfying revenge of all. When my husband and I left for our honeymoon, I thought I had handled the situation perfectly. I blocked my mother-in-law, exposed her behavior without directly attacking her, and set firm boundaries. For the first time in years, I felt free. But I underestimated one thing. My mother-in-law was not the type of person to let things go. She was furious. And when a manipulative person starts losing control, they become dangerous. We had turned off our phones when we left for our honeymoon. And for 3 weeks, we enjoyed pure peace. No calls, no texts, no drama. But the moment we landed back home, reality hit us hard. As soon as we turned our phones on, my husband's phone exploded with notifications. 37 missed calls from his mother. dozens of texts, all ranging from guilt-tripping to full-on rage, several voicemails, each one more unhinged than the last. The first few messages were fake apologies. "I didn't mean to hurt you, sweetheart. I was just looking out for you. Your wife is turning you against your own mother. I raised you. How can you do this to me?" Then, when my husband ignored her, the messages turned aggressive. "You ungrateful little brat, you'll regret this when I'm gone. You let that woman come between us, you are no longer my son." And then came the threats. "I hope your wife is happy now, because she's ruined this family. If you don't call me back, I will make sure you regret it." I looked at my husband. His face was a mix of anger and sadness. "She's never going to change," he muttered. "No," I agreed, "but we can make sure she never pulls this again." Ignoring my mother-in-law wasn't enough. She had lost control, and now she was going to do anything to get it back. Over the next few days, she escalated her behavior. She called my husband's workplace. She pretended to be sick and told his boss she needed to reach him for a family emergency. Thankfully, my husband had already warned HR about her, so they shut her down immediately. She showed up at our house. We had a security camera, so we saw her banging on our front door for nearly 20 minutes. She screamed about how my husband had abandoned his real family. We did not answer. Eventually she left, but not before leaving a long, handwritten letter about how I was stealing her son. She contacted my family. She called my parents and siblings, trying to turn them against me. Luckily, my family knew exactly who she was and shut her down immediately. At this point, it was clear she was spiraling, but she had no idea that she was about to make the biggest mistake of all. One night, my husband and I were having dinner when my phone buzzed. A random number had sent me a screenshot of a Facebook post from my mother-in-law. What I saw made my blood boil. She had posted, "It's heartbreaking when your only son chooses a woman who manipulates him and turns him against his own mother. But I will always pray that one day he will see the truth before it's too late." Underneath the post, she had tagged my husband. And the comments? Filled with people defending her. "A mother's love is unconditional. He will come back to you one day. That woman is controlling him. Stay strong. She sounds like a gold digger." I took a deep breath. Enough is enough. This time I wasn't going to stay silent. I never publicly attacked my mother-in-law. I didn't need to. Instead, I used her own actions against her. I gathered every message, voicemail, and Facebook post she had sent. I compiled them into one document, showing her toxic behavior in full detail. I made sure to include timestamps so no one could claim it was fake. I sent everything to the entire family. I wrote a calm and professional message. "I am sharing this so you all can see what we have been dealing with. My husband and I will no longer tolerate this harassment. If you support her behavior, feel free to remove yourselves from our lives." And then I sent it to everyone. I exposed her Facebook lies. My husband commented under her Facebook post saying, "Mom, stop lying. You have harassed us, shown up at our house, and called my job. I have the proof. If you do not stop, we will take legal action." Then he attached screenshots of her messages. We made it official. We sent a cease and desist letter to my mother-in-law. We warned that if she continued, we would file a restraining order. My husband changed his phone number. And just like that, the tables had turned. My mother-in-law's Facebook post backfired horribly. People saw my husband's response and started calling her out. Some of her own friends unfriended her, realizing she was lying. Her reputation in the family collapsed overnight. She tried calling my husband from different numbers, but every time, he ignored her. Eventually, she gave up. A few weeks later, we heard from other relatives that my mother-in-law was playing the victim, claiming that we had cut her off for no reason. But no one believed her anymore. She had burned every bridge, and she had no one to blame but herself. I never screamed, I never argued, I never fought with her. I just let her expose herself, and in the end, she lost everything. Now my husband and I live peacefully without her in our lives, and honestly, it feels amazing. For months, my husband and I enjoyed peace. After exposing my mother-in-law's toxic behavior, we cut her off completely. No calls, no texts, no drama. For the first time in years, we could focus on our own lives instead of dealing with her constant manipulation. But then something happened that we never expected. My mother-in-law wasn't done with us. And this time, she wasn't reaching out to manipulate. She was genuinely desperate. One evening, my husband and I were having dinner when his phone rang. It was an unknown number. We usually ignored calls like this, but for some reason, my husband answered. And the voice on the other end made my blood run cold. "Please, I need help." It was my mother-in-law. But she sounded different. There was no arrogance, no manipulation, no anger, just exhaustion. "I have nowhere else to go." My husband and I exchanged a glance. This was the same woman who had tried to ruin our wedding, the same woman who had harassed us for months, the same woman who had tried to turn the entire family against me. "So why should we care?" "Mom," my husband said, his voice cold. "Whatever it is, it's not our problem." "Wait, please, just let me explain." He hung up, but something about her voice stuck with me. For the first time ever, she didn't sound like she was scheming. She sounded broken. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about everything she had done to me. The cruel words, the manipulations, the humiliation at my own wedding. But then I thought about something else. She was still my husband's mother. And even though he was angry, I knew part of him still cared. So the next morning I said, maybe we should hear her out. My husband frowned. "After everything she did?" "I know," I admitted, "and I'm not saying we forgive her, but let's just see what she has to say." He hesitated, then sighed. "Fine, one conversation, that's it." We agreed to meet her at a cafe, a public place, just in case. When she walked in, I almost didn't recognize her. She looked tired, thinner, weaker. There was no smug smile, no fake confidence. Just guilt. She sat down and took a deep breath. "I know I don't deserve this," she said, "but thank you for meeting me." My husband crossed his arms. "What do you want, Mom?" she sighed. And then, for the first time ever, she told us the truth. After we cut her off, my mother-in-law lost everything. Her friends abandoned her when they saw the proof of what she had done. Family members distanced themselves after realizing how toxic she was. Her financial problems caught up with her. She had been living beyond her means, and now she was drowning in debt. She had spent so many years trying to control my husband's life that she never built a life of her own. And now, she was alone. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she said quietly. I don't know who I am without this family." For the first time, she wasn't playing the victim. She was being honest. I looked at my husband. I could tell he was struggling. This was the woman who had hurt us so deeply, but she was also his mother. And so I made a decision. "We're not going to erase the past," I said. "But if you truly want to change, then prove it." She looked up surprised. "I do," she whispered. "I really do." So we gave her a chance. Not full forgiveness, not blind trust, but a chance. It's been 6 months since that conversation. My mother-in-law has been in therapy and working on herself. She still has a long way to go. But she's no longer the same person who tried to humiliate me at my wedding. And you know what? I don't regret giving her that chance, because sometimes people can change, but only if they truly want to. This story started with pain and betrayal, but it ended with growth and hope. My mother-in-law lost everything because of her own actions, but in the end she was willing to change. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough.